Assalamualaikum and good day to each and everyone. I am Tasnimah with Junaid and I'm here to discuss to you one learner-centered curricula, and that is a negotiated curriculum. Here are the topics that we will be discussing in my report. First, we will be defining negotiation. Second, major characteristics of a negotiated curriculum. Third, the implementation. And lastly, issues in negotiated curriculum. Now let's start with the question, what is a negotiated curriculum? A negotiated approach to curriculum design places the learner in the driver's seat by requiring teachers to respond to learners' needs, desires, and reflections on language learning. Such an approach empowers learners to become autonomous. This design, therefore, places the responsibility for curriculum development on the individual teacher because each class will differ in its collective needs and desires. Let's now define negotiation. A negotiated approach grew out of a number of themes prevalent in the 1980s. One theme was the desire to have learners move away from dependence on the teacher to become more autonomous learners. Another was the learner needs-based design. A third impetus came from the desire to have teachers themselves become more self-directed and independent from textbooks or prescribed curricula. Now, a final direction came from the recognition that curriculum design is an ongoing process during and after instruction, and not just in planning instruction. Green and Littlejohn also noted that negotiation in the classroom has been shown for facilitate second language acquisition. In negotiating the curriculum with learners, the teacher provides more opportunities for rich classroom discourse. Now the question is, who then is involved in the negotiation? In the pure version of a negotiated curriculum, only the teacher and the learners are involved. In this approach, the learner is considered to be a fully functional language user of their first language and other languages, who has a highly relevant initial competence of communicative knowledge and abilities. Learners also have their own interest both in terms of content and learning process. These interests then provide learner input in the negotiation. Teachers in turn have their own beliefs about language and language learning and even specific content interest. However, because learners' needs and wants are critical to engagement, they supersede teachers' predisposition. However, as professionals, teachers can use learners' expectations, needs, desires, and interests to fashion the learning experiences. So basically, when we say negotiated curriculum, it is the discussion between all members of the classroom to decide how learning and teaching are to be organized, determines the curriculum. They provide a pyramid of the various curricular components that can be negotiated: the wider educational curriculum, a specific language or subject curriculum, a course, a series of lessons, a sequence of tasks, and a task. Here, we learned that a negotiated curriculum is a dynamic process in which what is taught and learned is negotiated between teacher and students rather than being solely predetermined by the teacher. Now let's move on to the major characteristics of a negotiated curriculum. Noonan sets out how teachers could work with learners in each aspect of the curriculum. We will discuss only a few of these aspects, looking at how teachers and learners could work together to plan instruction. We have chosen aspects that teachers in almost every educational context could make use of, acknowledging that most teachers will not be in a position to implement a negotiated curriculum approach in its purest form. Now the first characteristic is needs analysis. Needs analysis is one of the areas in which most curriculum design experts agree that learners need to have some involvement. There are problems, however, because often teachers have no idea who will be in their class until the first day of class. Now, establishing the learning needs of the individual student can only come about through the often lengthy process of getting to know each individual student. Because curriculum design is ongoing throughout instruction, needs analysis can be conducted at different times and for different purposes. For example, Before a particular lesson or unit, a teacher might conduct a needs analysis to determine what type of learning activities students prefer. The next characteristic is choosing activities. The choice of activities and class arrangements is the aspect of curriculum for which teachers most often seek learner input. Some teachers survey students at the beginning of the course, while others assign activities and then ask students to evaluate the activity. This feedback can be in response to a survey or can just be a quick like or don't like response using check marks. Some teachers have students hold up different colored cards for whether they liked it or did not like it. While a quick response is useful, it often does not get at why students like or do not like a particular activity and so how it might be adjusted to meet learner needs and desires. Aside from asking whether students like it or dislike a particular activity, it is also useful to find out whether they have learned from it. The third characteristic is choosing content. Subject matter content, as opposed to language content, provides a unique opportunity for learner-centeredness. Many textbooks choose a subject that are dear to the hearts of their teachers but are of little interest to the learners. However, finding out what learners actually need in order to conduct their lives in English can be a useful starting point for choosing content. Learner-generated content can include student writing that is used as text in the classroom. It can also mean that all text used in the course are found and brought to class by the students. This is particularly effective in advanced English for specific purposes courses, where learners are all interested in the same subject matter. Learner-generated content can also include having students collect sample of language use in their context and bring them to class. The last characteristic that I'll be discussing is designing assessment. Assessment is probably one of the areas that teachers are most reluctant to negotiate with learners, and in some contexts, only negotiated formative assessment is possible. One type of formative assessment that can be used with learners of all ages and proficiency levels is a learner diary. Advanced learners can keep a narrative diary. For beginners, the teacher can provide heading or sentence frame for learners to complete, such as the following. This weekend I studied, or the second is this weekend I learned. This weekend I used English with. Now, learners can be prompted in their writings with starters such as things I find hard in English are, or things I'd like to be able to do in English are, or after an instructional unit on paraphrasing, the teacher can have students respond with yes or no or rate themselves on a 5-point scale to various statements. Negotiated curricula have been implemented in a variety of different contexts, such as an academic reading and writing course in Japanese university, a listening and speaking course in Vietnamese university, and a writing course in Iran. The most system-wide reform based on a negotiated approach to curriculum was attempted in Australia in the National Adult Migrant English Program, which is referred to as Junaid. Prior to 1980, the program used a centralized curriculum. From 1980, it developed the curriculum in the belief that teachers better understood their own local context and were, therefore, better able to make curricular choices for their learners. Teachers were expected to negotiate content, materials, and methodology with their learners. Noonan's study of the program showed that teachers felt the need for a number of supports if they were to achieve an effective negotiated curriculum. These needs included non-mandatory curriculum guidelines, in service for the development of program planning skills, procedures for deriving more homogeneous class groups, more resources such as counseling and bilingual and curriculum supports, more appropriate teaching or learning materials, and smaller classes. Now, this list is probably not dissimilar from what teachers using other curricular types might be requested if asked. Let's now dive to the last part of my report, which is about the issues in negotiated curriculum. The major criticism leveled against negotiated curricula have been the following. First, they expect each teacher to be a curriculum designer. Second, learners may not be the best judges of what and how to learn, or learners may consider that teachers are lazy. Third, it makes progression through a range of courses quite difficult. We will deal with each of these issues in turn. First, teacher as curriculum designer. Although in this volume we have set out a process for teacher to be able to engage in curriculum design, experience with negotiated design in the AMEP in Australia has shown that for all aspects of curriculum to be negotiated between teacher and learner is an overwhelming task that most teachers do not have the training or experience to be able to implement. In a review of AMEP, Bartlett and Butler concluded that the learner-centered curriculum created a great deal of stress, that teachers were required to have a range of new skills if the ideals of the learner-centered curriculum were to become reality, and that teachers required assistance and support in a number of areas. The second issue is the learner as curriculum co-designer. Many educators have experienced the teacher who is popular but does not help learners achieve their learning objectives and outcomes. Osterg notes that in his Turkish context, although a negotiated curriculum might seem unavoidable, students expect the teacher to be the source of knowledge, and students are likely to feel uncomfortable discussing instruction with highly respected teachers. In some cultural contexts, for the teacher to ask instructional opinion from the class implies the teacher is lazy or has abandoned them. Another issue is that teachers also felt they need multilingual support to be able to negotiate effectively with their learners. The last issue is establishing continuity across programs. Lack of continuity across programs so that learners could progress easily from one course to the next was cited as a major reason for the abandonment of the learner-centered curriculum model in Australia. Burns and De Silva Choice also noted that this lack of continuity was also felt by learners who did not feel that they were receiving feedback on their progress. That would be all. This has been Tasnimah with Junaid. Thank you for listening.